Money can solve some problems, but of course it cannot help against a real monster, although it can cover him up. Elisa Claps was born on January 21,
77 in der Stadt
1977 in the
Potenza
city
in
of
Italien
Potenza
geboren.
in Italy.
Diese
This
kleine
small
Stadt mit
town
knapp
with just under
70.000 Einwohnern
70,000
trug den
inhabitants
Spitznamen
bore the
Vertikal.
nickname
Sie
Vertical.
besteht aus Höhen und
It
Tiefen
consisted of
und liegt an der
highs and
Seite eines
lows and
Berges.
lay on the side of a hill. Her mother was a financial officer and her father worked as an employee in a tobacco shop. Elisa was the third child in the family. The first were siblings named Gilda and Luciana. The Claps were a very religious family. Every Sunday they attended church. Elisa was described as a friendly and loving girl. Elisa always saw only the good in people, which made her seem a little naive. Nevertheless, her kindness and compassion attracted people. She had many friends and easily got along with new acquaintances. At the time of the described events in September 1993, the 16-year-old Elisa was attending high school and was deciding about her future plans for life at that time. She dreamed of becoming a doctor. Therefore, she wanted to study at a medical university after her training and go to Africa as a volunteer with doctors. On September 12, 1993, she wanted to participate in a family celebration at the country house. To prepare everything, Elisa's parents and one of her brothers left the city early in the morning. Gilda was supposed to arrive in the late afternoon. As on any other Sunday, Elisa also wanted to go to church with her friend named Ileana. The friend should also go to lunch with Elisa's family. Elisa woke up early and left the house at 11:30 a.m. to go to the Church of Santissima Trinita, which was centrally located in the city. Her brother was waiting for the return of his sister around this time when the doorbell rang. The young man thought his sister had returned from church, but instead of her, her friend Ileana stood at the door. She said they had been together in church, but when they came out, a large crowd passed by and the girls lost sight of each other. She admitted that she could not find her friend and therefore decided to go to her house hoping she had already returned. These words sounded unconvincing from the beginning because in this small town it was difficult to lose someone out of sight. When her brother pointed out these inconsistencies, Ileana changed her story. She admitted that Elisa wanted to meet with a friend. The students should come home together after the service. However, the friend did not manage to meet Elisa at the agreed time. According to Ileana, the mysterious man was Danilo Restivo. Danilo Restivo was born on April 3, 1972 in Rizza, a small town in Sicily. In the mid-1980s, he and his family moved to Potenza when his father found a position as director of the city library. Since it was a respected position, the man decided to move with his entire family to the new location. The boy was described as strange. During his school years, for example, he spied on girls in the toilet. He even kept a diary in which he recorded everything he saw this way. His cousin Sonia, 2 years younger than him, described him as introverted and difficult to get along with peers, especially girls. According to her, Danilo tried every time they came home at the same time to lure her to a certain place under various pretexts. The girl refused, but one day she was curious and wanted to see what Danilo told her about. However, she did not want to go alone and turned to her cousin Angelo, who was 11 years old at the time, to accompany her. When the children arrived at the agreed time and place, Danilo informed them that he needed to blindfold their eyes and tie their wrists so that they could enter the secret place. Both agreed to do so. Danilo went ahead and led them to a place. The young man sat the children on chairs and began to grope them. Sonia took off the blindfold and saw how Danilo put on gloves, then grabbed a knife, threw Angelo's head back and stabbed him. The girl had time to react and the boy immediately ran away. Angelo was injured and bled. Sonia helped him and the children ran away together. Danilo pursued them and called after them not to tell anyone what had happened. Angelo lost a lot of blood when he was taken to the hospital. It turned out that the knife had only narrowly missed his main artery by a few millimeters. The boy was indeed on the edge of death and severely injured. Naturally, the children told the adults what had happened because it was obvious that the wound had not been caused by an accident, as Danilo tried to claim. A police report was filed against the juvenile offender. Afterwards, Danilo's father appeared at the doorstep of Angelo's family, begging with tears in his eyes to withdraw the statement to the police. The man even promised to pay money for it. He said he knew about his son's psychological problems and would ensure he received the necessary treatment. Since the father was a respected man in town, they accepted his offer. Angelo's family finally took the money and withdrew the complaint. Unfortunately, the man did not keep his promise and did not send his son for treatment, but prevented it to protect his reputation. In this way, the life of the juvenile criminal continued. In every phase, he had difficulties integrating into society and resisted greatly. The boy changed several educational institutions, but could never truly realize himself anywhere. After changing 3 schools, his father finally managed to enroll him at a private college where the teenager could obtain a high school diploma. This happened when he was 18 years old. Afterwards, Danilo joined military service but was quickly discharged. The young man wet the bed and behaved inappropriately. Such turns in his life did not stop. He continued his miserable existence under the wings of his wealthy father with connections. In the months before his disappearance, he was known for his obsessive and rude behavior toward girls. His father never did anything about his son's treatment, it only got worse. At that time, he had contact simultaneously with 3 girls from his neighborhood. He looked at all of them, but with each time he wanted more. He got their phone numbers and started calling them. Later, he sometimes played classical music into the receivers. According to the girls' statements, it sounded like a horror film. Then the man began sending letters with obscene motives and drawings. The whole thing began to escalate. The man started sending creepy gifts such as a timer with broken wires and a message saying boom. Unfortunately, Elisa Claps was on this list too. Danilo even began to walk across her path on the street. He knew where and at what time she would pass by, so he could suddenly appear everywhere and behave obsessively. Danilo began asking her for a date. Elisa had no feelings for the man. His presence even made her nervous. Nevertheless, out of pity, she repeatedly agreed to these meetings, communicated with him but tried to maintain distance. Gilda said that he himself had witnessed the obsessive behavior of his inappropriate neighbor one day, when the siblings were walking along the slope. Danilo began calling the girl to an unknown place and was very insistent, grabbing her arm and trying to pull her with him. Elisa pressed her brother's hand so hard that he realized he should not let her go with this man. Finally, Gilda managed to drive away the insistent suitor. Her brother was surprised by his sister's behavior because he had never seen her so frightened. However, she did not go into details of the communication with this young man. When Elisa's friend Ileana told Gilda with whom she wanted to meet that morning in church, namely Danilo, the brother became immediately concerned. According to the girl's statement, Elisa had finally found the strength to refuse Danilo's advances at that time. This meeting should have been the last one. The student agreed anew in the hope that the courtship would stop afterwards, but she was gravely mistaken. Afterwards, Gilda called Danilo's house. The call was answered by Danilo's father, Mr. Maurizio, who did not want to give the phone to his son. Gilda explained to him the seriousness of the situation. He said that his sister was supposed to meet Danilo but had not come home since then, and they were worried about where she was. The father handed the phone to his son, who admitted that he had indeed seen Elisa in church. According to Danilo, she complained about the young man who had harassed her when she came to this meeting. Then she left and he stayed to pray and never saw her again. After these words, the father took the receiver and abruptly dismissed Gilda. The missing girl's brother noticed what was going on, called the family, and told them what had happened. Everyone immediately returned home to look for Elisa. Elisa's other brother, Luciana, could not take it anymore and decided to go to Danilo Restivo's house to speak with him face to face. At the doorstep, the young man was once again met by Mr. Maurizio, who refused to open the door. Thereupon, Luciana threatened to break down the door. Finally, the strange man himself came downstairs and came out. He was very excited, literally sweating with excitement, and began stammering and visibly nervously repeating the story he had told Gilda on the phone. A few minutes later, Mr. Maurizio ended the conversation with his neighbor, just as he had done during the telephone conversation before. The missing girl's brothers went home and then immediately decided to go in the direction of the church where the sister had gone. They wanted to inspect the place where the girl was supposed to meet Danilo. In their opinion, she disappeared approximately at this location. Here the young men examined the church and wanted to go to the upper secret room whose door was locked. However, the priest denied them access. The Claps family decided to go to the police and report the girl's disappearance. From the beginning, they pointed to Danilo, whom they suspected was involved in the incident. Unfortunately, the police officers did not take the disappearance of the student seriously. Only 24 hours later did they file a report and decide to go immediately to Restivo's house to talk to the disturbed young man. Like everyone else, they were confronted by Mr. Maurizio. The man told them that his son had left Potenza towards Naples and would return within a day. One more day later, police officers arrived at the city's bus station to pick up Danilo from Naples and talk to him. However, he was not there. As it later turned out, the young man's father stopped the moving bus before it entered the city and picked up his son. The investigators went to his house to talk to the suspect. He was asked which shoes the friend had worn on the day of the incident. He answered sneakers and showed a shoe soaked in bleach, which seemed suspicious. In the evening, Mauro, Danilo, and the investigators went to the police station to question the young man about Elisa's disappearance. He made contradictory statements and was visibly nervous. Furthermore, the investigators discovered a deep-cut wound on his arm. Danilo explained this as an accident. He had supposedly fallen on the street while descending a staircase and collided with a stranger's metal object. Because of the deep wound, he began to bleed heavily, soiling his clothes. Danilo was never able to show the spot in the city wherever he took police officers to prove his statements. There was no trace of blood. Moreover, his story changed repeatedly during conversations with the police officers. All of this seemed very suspicious. According to his sister Anna, her brother came home covered in blood on the afternoon Elisa disappeared. She saw that he was traumatized and had to take him to the hospital where the doctors stitched him up. Despite the suspect young man's claim, the police immediately determined that the injury had been caused by a knife. As it turned out, nobody had seen Danilo between 11:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. on that day, and there was no one who could confirm his statements. Anna said that when he came home, not only his jacket but also his shirt and jeans were stained with blood. According to the description, it was obvious that there was too much blood for an accidental cut wound on his arm. At this point, all the clothing items had already been thoroughly washed. In the family's apartment, they insisted that they needed these objects for investigation. The investigator explained that they could exonerate the man this way, but Danilo's family opposed. The policeman even turned to the chief public prosecutor responsible for investigating Elisa's disappearance. Despite a justified suspicion, the arrest warrant was rejected. The prosecutor even ignored the fact that Danilo had previously been involved in a case of suspicion. Also, he was clearly the last person who had seen the missing girl alive. Witnesses had seen him with Elisa in the church, but none of them had seen the girl leave the church. When they searched Elisa's diary, they found a torn-out page. It seemed as if she or someone else had tried to conceal a secret in this way. The situation only moved forward on October 5 of the year when television broadcasted live about the girl's disappearance and the main suspect Danilo. A woman called in who did not want to give her name but said she believed Danilo was really involved in the disappearance. She told them that he had a fetish for women's hair. He even created a strange collection and kept strands framed in his room. To collect these samples, he often lingered near hair salons. Naturally, the local workers knew about him and even jokingly called him the barber. After the press conference, several women contacted the police who recognized Danilo and confirmed that he had discreetly cut their hair in public transportation, on the street, and in hair salons. The police understood that they were dealing with an obsessive fetishist with distinctly inappropriate behavior and compulsive personality traits. He could have been a sexual deviant, which further increased the authorities' suspicion. The women who approached the police told many things about the young man's behavior. Especially, the police learned that he harassed his female neighbors. Back then, he was perceived by his environment as a local fool. They considered him harmless and did not suspect that behind all this was a real monster. His father insisted that his son had never tried to harm others. Of course, he was clever regarding the details of the story. Although most were convinced of Danilo's involvement in the disappearance, there were followers who believed that Elisa simply ran away from home. The strongest denial came from Elisa's father. He had a very warm relationship with his daughter and was aware from the start that he was not destined to see her alive again. In parallel, the Claps family followed how the events surrounding Danilo developed. On March 7, 1995, he was accused of making false statements about Elisa's disappearance. By this time, the middlemen had succeeded in proving that he had lied both about the reasons for the meeting with the girl and about the injury on his arm and most other things he told. Elisa's best friend Ileana evaded answers when the prosecutor cornered her during the hearing. The girl said, "I am afraid that what happened to Elisa might happen to me too." She seemed to know more than she said. Nayla was sentenced to prison for perjury. Part of his sentence was served as a civilian worker in the local church. The same church the likely victim attended on Sundays and from which she never returned. It seemed there was a chance when the other girls who had become victims of stalking reported him to the police. Unfortunately, the result of these hearings was insignificant, a small fine for harassment of girls. Given his father's wealth, Danilo did not even feel this penalty. All this time, the Claps family waited for the results of the investigative work in the hope that they would find their daughter and finally punish the perpetrator with dignity. Unfortunately, it seemed the case was not progressing. This changed only in 1999 when the police approached a mafioso. He began cooperating with the investigation, which even advanced Elisa's case. He could not say anything about the girl, but he exposed the criminal activities of the chief public prosecutor who prohibited the seizure of Danilo's clothes. This prosecutor was the one who had revoked the arrest warrant. As it turned out, he had received a large sum of money from Mr. Maurizio, thereby influencing and even stopping the investigations. The mafioso was eventually charged with slander. His words, however, helped draw a new investigative team's attention to Elisa Claps' disappearance. Unfortunately, they had to start the investigation from scratch. The police officers first obtained a search warrant and came to the house of the alleged perpetrator. In the man's room, they found strange things. In particular, they found a whole box full of photos of people with pronounced physical disabilities. Danilo claimed these were his ex-girlfriends, but this turned out to be a lie. He deliberately chose one-legged and one-armed women who could behave well and photographed them. As it turned out, he liked mutilated female bodies. Next, the investigators went to the church they also wanted to search. The police tried to open the exact door the local priest had never opened for the Claps brothers. The priest had meanwhile closed the church for all parishioners and had traveled to Fugi to take a thermal bath. His name was Don Dominic Sabia, a man who always reacted evasively to Elisa's story while downplaying everything. Later, it turned out that Don Dominica was a close friend of Danilo's family. He even accompanied his father when he met with the parents of the victim, Angel, and helped pressure them not to make a statement to the police. After Danilo served his sentence for the false statement, he left Potenza and traveled through Europe. Wherever he stayed, his insane nature always followed him. In all cities where he stayed, women were strangely harassed and attempts were made to cut their hair. Occasionally, he returned to his parents and each time behaved very reservedly. At this time, Gilda created a website he used to continue drawing attention to his sister's disappearance. Unexpectedly, he received a letter signed with Elisa. The message was written in her name and stated that she had voluntarily run away from home and was currently in Brazil. She asked him not to look for her. Of course, the brother recognized that the letter was forged, so he set out to search for the sender's address. He was not very surprised when the search revealed Danilo, who turned out to be the sender of the letter. Thus, the suspicion against him was further reinforced. Even after that, the situation did not progress until November 12, 2002. The following event occurred in the United Kingdom in the city of Bournemouth. A 48-year-old single mother named Heather Barnett lived with her schoolgirl daughters. When the two girls came home that day, their mother did not greet them as usual. In the bathroom, the children discovered the woman's corpse lying in a pool of blood. It was a gruesome sight that shocked the girls. The mother had been bludgeoned with a hammer and her throat had been slit. Her breast was cut off and lay next to her head. A strand of hair that did not belong to the woman was stuck in her right hand, and under her left arm was something from her own hair. It is assumed that Heather was attacked shortly after returning home from school in the morning. When the police began investigating the murder, the suspicious neighbors caught their attention rather quickly. Directly opposite the dead woman's door lived a couple. The woman was named F.A. Masson and the man was the already known Danilo. Danilo met F.A. over the internet and moved to Great Britain to start a new life. They married and he adopted her 2 children from a previous marriage. The deceased Heather worked from home. A seamstress visited her allegedly to discuss sewing curtains. He was the first to be on site when he returned home with his companion and the children raised the alarm. The man comforted the girls. Police officers took him in for questioning. Danilo presented a bus ticket with a time stamp to support his alibi that he was attending a computer course at the time of the murder. They believed him and let him go home. Danilo gave the impression of an awkward man who would leave many footprints, while the perpetrator left only a few footprints at the crime scene. Luminol tests revealed a chain of bloody shoe prints that abruptly ended. This indicates that the murderer changed his shoes before leaving the crime scene. Later, it turned out that Danilo had cleaned his sneakers with bleach, as he had done after Elisa's disappearance. The daughters of the victim said that their mother had lost her keys after Danilo's next visit before the murder, but had not had time to change the locks. Now it was clear why he visited her so often. He had inspected the future crime scene and stolen the keys to gain access to the house. The police began following the suspect and tapping his calls to gather evidence against him. When Danilo was secretly filmed with a camera, he pursued single women. The surveillance team was concerned and decided to approach him and search him. Danilo wore suspicious waterproof trousers. In his car, the police found spare clothing, a butcher knife, a balaclava, and gloves. It was the perfect criminal equipment that looked very suspicious. The police searched his apartment and found strands of hair on the cleaned sneakers he wore on the day of the murder. They found small bloodstains, but due to the bleach, they could not be identified. A DNA test showed that a bloody towel left at the crime scene contained Danilo's samples. He claimed to have left it behind during a visit to the house beforehand. Previously, contacts were made from Italy and learned that Danilo was suspected in the case of Elisa's disappearance. Everyone believed he had killed her. Danilo was charged with Heather's murder. On March 17, 2010, 17 years after Elisa's disappearance, her mummified remains were discovered by a maintenance team on the attic of the church in Potenza. Alongside Sergi's glasses, shoes, the girl's clothing, and strands of hair from other persons, her bra was also found. It was cut open, her breasts were cut off, and her jeans were unbuttoned. The rape victim and her family believed that the priest Don Domenico had intentionally hidden the body and knew where it lay. For years, he never allowed an inspection behind the locked door of the church. After the discovery of the corpse, the church was closed. The preliminary forensic examination showed that Elisa had been stabbed about 10 times with a sharp object, probably a knife or scissors. During an examination of the church attic, fingerprints and DNA traces were found that belonged to Danilo as well as to another man, presumably the priest Don Dominic. On March 9, 2011, Elisa Capps was buried. Danilo was imprisoned in England in the meantime. He was accused of murdering Heather Barnett, and evidence was gathered against him. On June 30, 2011, Danilo was sentenced to life imprisonment by a court in Winchester for Barnett's murder. In November 2012, the British Court of Appeal reduced the sentence to 40 years in prison. On November 8, 2011, a fast-track trial began in Italy for Elisa's murder. Everything happened without the accused, who refused to participate via video link. At this time, the proceedings in Great Britain were still pending, which is why the extradition of the perpetrator was refused. For the reconstruction carried out by the public prosecutor's office, it was shown that Danilo had arranged to meet Elisa in the church on the morning of this fateful day. He initially had dirty intentions with the girl. Elisa caught wind of it, tried to flee, and hid in the attic of the church. The young man found her and hit her multiple times from behind. The girl tried to defend herself but could not. He raped and killed her. As irrefutable proof of his involvement, the prosecution presented the DNA samples from bloodstains on the murdered woman's clothing that matched Danilo's DNA. It is known that the suspect was injured on his arm that day, not by chance but during a struggle, and left a blood imprint on Elisa's clothing. The Italian public prosecutor requested the maximum sentence of 30 years in prison. On November 11, the court largely approved the request of the public prosecutor and sentenced the perpetrator to pay €700,000 to the Claps family. The verdict was subsequently confirmed in the main trial, which took place in the presence of Danilo. The perpetrator is currently in prison in the United Kingdom, where he has been serving a 40-year sentence since 2011 for the murder of Heather Barnett. In 2051, after completing his sentence in the United Kingdom, he will be extradited to Italy and imprisoned there for another 30 years for the murder of Elisa. But even after that, the case is not concluded as numerous allegations against the church and its responsible individuals must be addressed, as well as against those who discovered Elisa's remains and apparently concealed them for a long time. The corpse had previously been found by the priest. He claimed he did not immediately tell anyone because the archbishop was busy that day, and the next day he forgot about the matter. He remembered only much later despite the protest of the Claps family. Eventually, all charges against the church were dropped, which was particularly painful for Elisa's relatives. They were outraged by the commemorative plaque honoring Don Dominic that was attached to the church. They believed he had covered up for the perpetrator and hidden the corpse for all those years. Despite all objections, the church was reopened in early November 2023 and the first service was held. Relatives of Danilo's British victim criticized the Italian police investigation and pointed out that Heather would still be alive if Elisa's corpse had been found earlier and the perpetrator had been sent to prison. They believe that the impunity encouraged the perpetrator to commit further crimes. Some believe he committed a ritual murder. Elisa was killed on September 12, 1993, and Heather on November 12, 2002. It appears suspicious that he attacked his victims on the 12th of the respective month and left a strand of hair near their corpses. There are speculations that Danilo may have had many more victims. The lawyers of the petty criminal Amr Ben Git, who was convicted of the murder of the Korean woman Chono Asin in Bournemouth, hinted that Danilo may have committed this crime too. He was living in the area at the time. The manner of the crime and even the knife matched. A lock of hair was found next to the corpse. The Korean woman was murdered in 2002 on the 12th Street. However, there is no evidence linking him to the crime, so Danilo was not charged in this case. It is suspected that he was involved in attacks on women in Italy, France, and the United Kingdom during the time he lived there. For example, his involvement in the disappearance of Erika Arman in Italy is seriously considered. She disappeared without a trace on April 20, 2003. The boyfriend and her mother waited for her at a restaurant for Easter dinner, but she did not come. After Danilo's arrest, search queries with her name were found on his computer. He actively followed the investigations in this case, which seems suspicious. Criminals often do this with Erika's case. Erika's corpse has not been found to this day, and no one has been charged in this case. Thank you for watching and take care of yourself.